They had no electricity, no machines, no emergency hotline. Yet somehow, medieval peasants endured the unendurable famine war plague, bitter winters, not with gadgets, not with rescue, but with quiet systems built from memory, adapted by necessity. They learned how to live with little and stretch it far. Every drop of rain mattered. Every scrap of fabric, every ember, every root in the soil had a purpose. These weren't hacks. They were lifelines refined over generations, forgotten only when comfort took their place. Today, when the grid hums and apps tell us when to drink water, we forget a harsh truth. When the lights go out, survival belongs to those who still remember. This video uncovers the ancient blueprint of survival, not for nostalgia, but because some of these systems still work. Technique 1. Harvesting rainwater without tools. Water didn't flow from pipes. It came from storms, brief, chaotic, and rare. So medieval people turned every rooftop into a quiet machine. Thatched eaves, carved gutters, ceramic jars, all arranged not for beauty, but for function. They didn't purify with filters. They strained with cloth, slowed with moss, and cooled with buried clay cisterns. Rain wasn't just collected, it was protected from light, heat, and time. In times of drought, they rationed not just by need, but by purpose, drinking, soaking, cleaning. Gray water was reused. No drop was wasted. Entire villages were shaped to channel the sky, funneling rain into shared basins and shared responsibility. Today's rain harvesting systems mirror the same logic-angled roofs, gravity-fed flow, simple filtration. Not innovation, just remembrance. Because survival didn't begin with technology. It began when we learned how to catch the sky. Technique 2. Staying warm without firewood. Heat didn't come from flames. It came from insulation intention and habit. When wood was scarce, medieval homes didn't fight the cold. They learned how to trap warmth before it escaped. Walls were thick with earth and straw. Floors were lined with wool rushes, or nothing at all, just bodies sharing warmth like coals in a bed of ash. Homes were dug into hillsides, not for design, but for the steady breath of the earth. Windows were not made of glass, but of hide parchment or cloth layered to slow the wind. They didn't heat spaces, they heated people. A stone warmed once by fire might serve all night if wrapped and placed just right. Today, passive heating systems mimic the same logic thermal mass earth shelters compact spaces. When energy is scarce, comfort doesn't come from burning more. It comes from losing less. Technique 3. Cooking with almost no fuel. Firewood wasn't for every meal. It was too precious to burn twice for the same purpose. So medieval kitchens learned to store heat, not repeat it. A single firing of a clay oven might cook bread, then stew, then dry herbs, each using the fading warmth. Heat wasn't wasted, it was sequenced. Meals were planned not by hunger, but by temperature curves. For those without ovens, pits in the earth became slow, cookers' stones heated food. Buried time allowed to transform it. Soups were not just food. They were calculated strategies, reheated, refilled, extended. Even smoke was minimized. Fewer fires meant fewer eyes, stinging, fewer lungs coughing. Today's thermal cookers and insulated stoves echo this same rhythm. In survival, the question isn't how do we make more heat, it's how do we honor the heat we already have. Technique 4. Foraging with precision. Survival wasn't just in the soil they tilled, it was in the margins. Hedgerows, meadows, stream banks where food grew wild, unseen by the untrained eye. Foraging wasn't luck, it was literacy in nature passed from mother to child, year after year. They knew what to pick, but more importantly, when. Some greens were only safe in early spring, others turned bitter with time or toxic with age. Mistakes were not minor, they were fatal. But with the right knowledge, weeds became nutrients. Roots became medicine. Modern survivalists now study these same plants in books and apps. But medieval foragers didn't study. They remembered. They walked the same paths in the same order, season after season, turning landscape into memory. In a world where supply chains fail overnight, recognizing what grows underfoot is more powerful than owning what's on the shelf. Technique 5. Preserving food without refrigeration. Food doesn't wait for convenience. When harvests came, they came all at once. And without preservation, they vanished just as fast. So peasants learned to pause time with salt smoke, ash, snow, air, and earth. Each method matched a season, a climate, of food: salt for meat, ash for roots, straw for cellars. Nothing was universal. Everything was specific. They didn't just store calories, they preserved security one jar at a time. A mistake in storage wasn't just waste, it was risk. Today's preppers vacuum seal, freeze dry, label, and shelf. But medieval storage relied on senses, sight, smell, weight. A fermented smell didn't mean spoilage, it meant readiness. Preservation wasn't static. It was a process, interactive, iterative, intuitive. In a world where cold requires power, true preservation begins when you learn to keep warmth, light, and time at bay. Technique 6. Treating illness without medicine. Doctors were distant, pharmacies didn't exist, but illness didn't wait for help. So peasants turned to what they had: plants, patience, and passed down knowledge. Garlic wasn't flavor, it was defense. Honey wasn't sweet, it was antiseptic. Vinegar wasn't just for food, it was a disinfectant, wound cleanser, tonic base. The body wasn't treated with pills, but with teas, poultices, tinctures. Elder women, not doctors, were the center of rural medicine, curating gardens, observing symptoms, applying remedies by feel, not formula. Experience mattered more than theory. They couldn't cure everything, but they could soothe, slow, and sometimes save. And when herbs failed, rituals stepped in, not as fantasy, but as mental medicine. Today, science is circling back, validating garlic, willow, honey, vinegar once again. In the absence of access, healing began not in labs, but in gardens and memory. Technique 7. Defending without weapons. Defense didn't mean weapons. Most peasants had no sword, no armor, no trained guard, but they had land, time, and each other. Thorns became fences, ditches became traps, hills and bends in the road became barriers. They didn't fight intruders head-on. They made arrival difficult, noisy, uncertain. Every structure was built with delay in mind, slowing, not stopping. Entrances zigzagged, windows were small, doors were reinforced from within. A boiling pot wasn't just for soup, it became a warning. More than anything, they relied on community response: a horn, a bell, a chain of watchful eyes. Children ran messages, elders closed doors. No one stood alone. Today, when defense often means gear, the old world reminds us real security is layered, collective, and deeply local. And sometimes the strongest walls are made of people. Technique 8. Mental survival through ritual and belief. The cold can be endured, the hunger can be managed, but hopelessness that breaks people faster than any famine. Medieval peasants didn't have therapists. They had rituals, cyclical, communal, symbolic. Fire festivals in winter, harvest songs in autumn, prayers whispered before meals. These weren't just habits. They were anchors reminding them that suffering was seasonal, not eternal. Stories, myths, and shared memories turned chaos into narrative. A flood became a trial. A plague became part of a larger cycle. Faith gave structure where logic failed. And when death arrived, ritual gave the living a script to mourn, to release, to continue. Today, mental resilience is taught in books and clinics. But once it was woven into everyday life, because survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about remembering why you want to. They didn't call it prepping. They didn't call it off-grid living. For them, it was just life, quiet, hard, persistent. They didn't invent systems. They inherited them, refined through hunger, winter, and necessity. Collecting rain, saving heat, stretching food, sharing risk. These weren't techniques. They were a mindset rooted in rhythm, not reaction. Today, we wrap the same wisdom in new terms: passive design, permaculture, resilience. But peel back the language, and you'll find the same core live close to the land. Live close to each other, and never assume comfort is permanent. Because survival doesn't begin when disaster strikes. It begins long before in the way we think, build, and remember. And if any part of this ancient knowledge speaks to you, don't just watch, practice, share, relearn. Because the future may depend not on what we invent, but on what we choose to remember.